You know what that sound means? Welcome to episode 29 of Momentous Live. I'm Tristan Jutra. To one side of me is,
William Silver.
and below me in the
I'm Ray
purple,
Williams.
and to one side of him is returning for, is this seventh or eighth time? I'm losing
Yeah,
track.
it doesn't matter now. We're really not counting anymore. I'm really already feeling old enough. But kitty corner from Tristan, it's Jamie Reynolds.
I thought you were going
You
to
get
say
that free
Katie,
coffee though, so the card's been stamped. You're good to go.
you said Katie Corner? I thought you were going to
I
say
said kitty corner.
I thought you were going to say Katie Couric.
Really? You thought I would say Katie Couric?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I usually say it at least 2 or 3 times a day. So
a stunning resemblance. It's a little Tourette's thing. We don't judge here. Neurodiversity is our strength. Biscuits. Anyway. So, hi, fellas.
Hey.
You notice that someone is still conspicuous by their absence because I don't want to dox them, but they might be on a tropical island somewhere. Rumor is Tasia will be back October 5th, but anything's possible at this point.
Yeah.
Yes. And Gray might be leaving us for a little bit, but he may appear from the Phantom Zone in some form or another. Gray, how long are you going to be gone?
I'm going to be gone for about 6 weeks. There's a bit of overlap. Actually, yeah, there's a bit of overlap. So 6 weeks.
Oh boy. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Oh, there we go. You're going to be Force Ghost.
Force Ghost Gray.
All right, we've got lots to talk about today. A lot of space stories, but first, let's get a couple things out of the way. First, Google. This major privacy change is coming to billions of Android devices soon. Google is rolling out a privacy-enhancing answer to all those forgotten and unused Android apps once granted access to your sensitive data. So if you have an Android device, and just like, if you have an iOS device, and especially when you're getting going or you hear about apps from friends and whatnot, you install all these apps and they ask for all these permissions to access your photos, your camera, or your microphone, or your contacts, your calendar, all sorts of permissions. And you may need to grant those permissions in order to actually use the app in some cases. We talked about that with Clubhouse way back in January, February, I think, because that was one of the things, like you had to grant access, I think, to your address book to use Clubhouse or your Twitter, one or the other. And it's like, I don't know. And there's a few things like that I've just not even used because, you never know how deep they're getting their tentacles into your various databases on your phones. So this is a case where Google's, I think, doing the right thing here and just sort of paying attention to the fact that a lot of people have a lot of currently unused apps on their phone. And they're saying, maybe they're doing something so that we don't have to worry about this so much anymore. Jamie, can you walk us through this just a little bit?
I guess from a user point of view, absolutely. For me, it's something that I actually notice that I have a bunch of old apps that sit on my phone, and I only seem to delete them when I run out of space, which is not so frequent anymore. But yes, I have some good blackjack apps that I was using, which for some reason needed access to my camera and maybe my contacts, and whatever. What are they going to do with it? But then I realized, they're going to maybe do something with that. So I delete that, and it's more to train me how to be better at blackjack, which I believe actually makes me worse at playing blackjack. But that's another whole other story there. But yeah, to me, it makes a lot of sense because I can think of many apps that you really don't know why they're asking for these permissions, and then you do forget about them. They just sit there, and they're small little things. You don't think about deleting them because they don't take up much space. But yeah, it's really not. They're not necessary to have. So I think it's a good way to just keep the phone. Not even the phone clean. It's really just to keep your data, I guess, maybe a little cleaner, or just keeping better restrictions on your data, I suppose. I'm still very free with my data. I don't worry so much about it. But I know for people who are concerned with it, it's definitely a good thing to just have as hopefully a default for people to use.
Gotcha. I have an Android phone. It's probably 5 years old now, and I fire it up once in a while, and of course it has to do like a million software updates to get going. But there's stuff on there. It's like, it'd probably be good to either remove them or disable them or what have you. So it's nice to see that Google is taking care of this for us. And as regards my daily driver, which is my iPhone 10, that's coming up 4 years now. I have dozens, if not hundreds of apps on there because we're always testing things out to talk about on this show or previous shows we've done on or previous courses that some of us have taught. So we're always test driving various apps, and it's amazing how they accumulate. So another good opportunity is, like you mentioned, Jamie, when your phone tends to fill up, but sometimes it's when you get the new phone. And of course, Google and Apple make it so easy nowadays for us to migrate all of our stuff over. But it's also a good opportunity to have a fresh start and take the pain and manually migrate a handful of things like
and
the
you
settings.
know what? I tried doing that with when I got my S21 Ultra. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna really make an effort to just kind of sift through everything and get it all cleaned up. Nah, you know what? I just decided let's just swap it all over, and then I'll fix it up later.
Yeah.
I never do, and that's happened. I think for the last 2 phones that I've used, it just kind of carries through. So. Now, I guess I didn't really research this enough to know, but when you do that, I don't think you have to re-enable your permissions. The permission structure is still set for you on a new phone. So that would be an interesting way of doing it as well when you do a phone upgrade, to actually have to re-enable those. But I know with Google's new setup now, it has been asking more permissions to re-enable access to data. And that's been kind of nice just as a little refresher. But I think this is a really good idea. I think this is really useful.
Yeah, so the rollout of the auto reset feature will gradually take place after kicking off in December, but it won't reach all devices from Android 6 to Android 10 until Q1 2022, according to Google. So if you have phones or devices that are Android 5 or earlier, they probably can't reach back that far in time through Google Play services to access that. I mean, that's one of the ways that Google has been getting around the whole lack of full Android updates for some phones. As we know, this is one of the challenges in the Android ecosystem, is that if you're buying an Android phone through a carrier, one of the challenges, some carriers will only give you updates for a year or two, and it's unless you're planning on rooting your phone, it can be tricky to actually get subsequent Android updates. So in order to get around this, Google has sort of divided up key parts of the operating system under the guise of Google Play services to enable them to be able to update other key parts of the system, especially when it comes to security and privacy point of view. So that even if people are running older versions of the OS and can't upgrade thanks to carrier restrictions, they can still enjoy a lot of the new features. But I think it seems like that maybe have started with Android 6. So before then, you're out of luck. But Android 5 is how many years old now?
That's got to be pretty old now.
That's way back. I can't remember what dessert that was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was all dessert based back then.
Yeah. Well, what's your what's your general strategy for managing all the apps? Like, do you just do the migration assistant from one device to another? You're thinking of maybe getting a new phone this year, or are you just going to drag everything over with you, or are you going to take the opportunity to do a clean slate?
I've got a little bit of the problem of what Jamie says, which is the equivalent of moving, which is like I moved a bunch of stuff from my apartment to my partner's apartment to then our house, and it hasn't been opened since 2 steps back when it was at my apartment. So I do that sometimes, but to be honest with you, last time, Apple makes it super easy, which is both good and bad. This isn't an Apple plug, but I last time at least went through and deleted a bunch of stuff. So deleted a bunch of apps that I just never used. But in the 2+ years that I've had the phone, it's amassed a bunch of other apps as well. I do like the feature we talked about a while ago that Apple is asking when you open apps. I've noticed a couple old apps that I've had to re-download have asked about sharing data, and do you want this to share data? So I like how Apple does that. So it's great if the Android ecosystem is going to do that as well. I'm all for it. My wife's on an Android phone, so that'd be great.
Gray, anything to add before we roll on to the next topics?
Well, that was November 2014 for Android 5, which was Lollipop. Now, this is kind of a feature that Apple's had for a little while, wherein not only will it ask you, this app has been using your location permissions, or it's had access to your contacts for a while. Do you want to continue to have that? I've got a Honeywell system at home that I use for thermostat control, and it'll ping me and be like, hey, by the way, this is using your location, because it knows when both Ray and I are home, and it changes the temperature based on that. Do you want to still do that? Yeah, we're good. But when processes, which actually went through this morning when I upgraded to iOS 15, is actually go through my list and see what's still there that I downloaded that I don't use. But the phone does that automatically as well. If you don't use an app for a certain amount of time, you can set it so that it'll actually be removed from the device, which removes that privacy issue altogether. So yeah, way to go, Google. There's nothing bad about this one.
All right. So, but if we want a bit more bad on our lives, how about we move on to Facebook? Because they've been always a wonderful source of angst for
Unleash the Kraken.
So there was a story that broke last week, just before we aired. We didn't talk about it last week, but it's been explored quite extensively on various podcasts, articles, YouTube channels, and whatnot. So we'll just touch on this very briefly. And this is something that a lot of us have been talking about. And there's been previous research done for a number of years. Some of us who teach in digital media, social media, and so on have even discussed this with our students over the years, is that there was a leaked report, an internal study that Facebook had, that was released in the Wall Street Journal, that Facebook has repeatedly found that its photo sharing app Instagram is harmful to a significant percentage of teenagers. It cited studies over the past 3 years that examined how Instagram affects its young user base, with teenage girls being the most notably harmed. And of course, as we touched on a few weeks ago, while this is all happening, Facebook is busy putting together a version of Instagram for kids, which, we debated whether or not that was actually a good idea. We could get them while they're young.
It's like a shorter cigarette.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is it. This is cancer, and we know it's cancer, and we've done nothing about it. And I'm looking at Zuckerbutt right now, and I'm like, okay, so you realize, because we've seen studies like this for the last 5 years, and Facebook has now done one internally. And they cannot deny this. So this has been, internal documents leaked. Like this is actually what's going to, I think, two things. One, fragment Facebook. Like we're going to see that because Instagram is about to become a very dangerous albatross around their neck. But I don't think this just stops at teenagers. Like there are lots of folks out there that use Instagram for art, but there are a lot of folks out there for whom this is a comparative life tool, and it is not a positive experience. When you take a look around at the vast majority of, we're throw air quotes, influencers. What is the experience with them usually like for you? Is it a positive one? Do we kind of look at what they're doing and go, wow, I really wish my life was like that? Or is that the little green monster kind of inside and you're sort of going, from any perspective of, I wish I had more clout like that so I could be doing the things that they're doing, or the envy of having the things that they have. This is not a healthy platform right now. And I don't know what to do to fix it.
Well, that's the thing.
Censorship.
Yes, massive, unsweet. So
more fascism.
Well, technically, I mean, China's doing it with TikTok. They're limiting kids under the age of 14 to a certain amount of time per day, and that's pure communism. So I don't really. I mean, I guess you go far enough around the horn, they meet, right? So
yeah, it's a slippery slope. You got to be careful with that kind of stuff.
The slope ends for a lot of us at 18, right? As soon as you hit 18, there's no more slope. You can do whatever the hell you want, right? You can. I guess you can't drink in a lot of provinces. You could go to war. There's that. You can drive, which is great. And you can also have suicidal thoughts on Facebook. But before that, we should probably stop people from doing that.
I don't, when you say that, this is where I struggle with when I say that you say that we should stop people from, so we should allow governments to start being the parental controls. I don't know about that. I think we should be doing more education with parents. I think parents need more responsibility.
I think the cigarettes analogy is apt though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I don't disagree with you on that, but governments still sell cigarettes and they do limit it, but it's up to parents, I think, I think to do better parenting when it comes to social media.
You can't give your kids permission to go buy cigarettes, though. You can't give your permission to kids to go buy alcohol.
I did when I was 8. I picked up smokes from my stepdad when I was 8 from the corner store.
Okay, it's not 1955 anymore. But you're right. Like parents should actually be, the first line should be education. But we've been at Instagram for a very long time, and we're seeing now that the rate of suicidal thoughts in teenage girls who are on this platform.
Agreed.
Nothing's been done here. We put parental controls in place at the operating system level. There is an age check that's built into the app, which is useless, doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And so now we're at a point where we're saying, we've tried to get parents to pay attention, and they either don't understand or don't care. I would say don't understand would probably be it. To your point, the education thing is the issue. But I don't know how much more we can educate parents in something that is this emerging world of never forget cyberbullying, right?
Yeah, but I think this is what. But you've got two separate thoughts here. You're saying, well, this has been around so long that we can't. People should have known by now. And then you say, well, it's still emerging, and it is. This is the problem. These things are still evolving, and I think this is at such a nascent stage. Instagram's going to disappear for young kids soon enough compared to what Facebook did. In the last few years, and there'll be something else. The TikTok is the latest thing. Is TikTok, should that be limited as well? Should all social media be limited so kids shouldn't be able to access it? Okay,
I don't think they should
Go for it.
be able to access
TikTok
it.
should be banned, right? Personally,
But here's the thing. I would actually stand right behind actual physical time limits built into the app for any account that is registered. And if you've got a kid who's under a certain age, those accounts should have to be identified as children's accounts. Where that has to be done through, some sort of government cooperation ID thing. I don't know. But the idea of people under the age of 18 who are able to freely access the system, given the nature of things like suicidal thoughts and bullying, all these other sort of things. The question that I have to ask is, how many more kids have to die? How many more kids have to have their lives irreparably damaged before we're going to take action? Just because, it's both new and old at the same time, we haven't quite figured it out. Slamming the door on this one, I'm perfectly good with.
Yeah, but you could use the same analogy when it comes to swimming pools. How many kids have to die before we eliminate swimming pools or the government restricts access to swimming pools because of all the kids that die every year because of that?
That's a slippery deck.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But you make a joke of it. But that's the issue that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with similar kinds of situations. But the reality is we need to do a better job.
So
I think as a culture.
Allow me to rebut. With a swimming pool, what's usually there when kids are at a swimming pool?
A government mandated fence? No.
Lifeguard.
Not anymore. Budget cuts.
No. I'm talking about personal swimming pools. I'm talking about people who have swimming pools in their backyards.
You don't have a personal social network. And again, the danger is limited to if you own something and you want your kids to be able to engage in that, great. You don't own Facebook. And let's be honest, I don't think there are many Canadians right now, or many people in the world, who actually have a decent control of what it is that their children are looking at or processing or being part of online. So the idea of if I've got a swimming pool, my parents put in a swimming pool when I was a kid, and there was a friends on Facebook, Vince. He was there as the pool was just being finished. The pool was finished. My dad was putting in the fence posts, and Vince couldn't swim. Vince decided to jump in. My dad moved across that yard faster than I can even blink and got that kid out of the pool. There was good supervision there. Good parenting. Now, here's the thing. Let's try to extend that analogy to Instagram. Where would parents be in this equation? Because there is so much that goes on.
Choosing to put parental locks on the phone, like you suggest. Again, my argument is to say, let's not just have government solve all of our problems. Government never solves all our problems. Let's make sure that we give the tools to the parents so they can deal with these kinds of things themselves in the way they see as fit. So that's
should there be accountability for the parent if something happens and they have not been part of that equation?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now we're talking. I can see eye to eye with you on this one. If we say, you know what, we're going to flip this back on the parents. We're not going to put this on the corporation. We're not going to put this on the government. We're going to put this on the parents. Mm-hmm. If something happens to your kids, kid commits suicide because of what's going on Facebook, or has a personal life issue because of something that has happened on Facebook.
Yes,
we're holding parents accountable. I can get behind
well, it depends on how you define accountable. If you say, hey, you should have done a better job doing, raising your kids and teaching them critical thinking skills and limiting their access to social media, absolutely. But to say, well, we're going to put you in jail because you didn't do things the way you're supposed to do, no, that's not how I see accountability.
So somewhere between jail
we're digressing
and a slap on the wrist lives where I want to be, which is your kid turns out to be a bully, or your kid turns out to be bullied.
But I think we're talking the same language here. I think we both agree that we shouldn't have government mandating that kids are not allowed to do certain things when it comes to social media, where parents should be involved more, I think, than they are right now.
I agree. I don't think it's going to happen, which is why I think we're going to have to step in and say anybody under the age of 18, there's going to have to be locks on the account, and it doesn't come down to the parents of that. It comes down to, here are the things you're not allowed to do on this network. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what those are yet, but it's going to have to be something that's better than.
Well, we'll talk to China and see what they're doing, and we'll see. We'll try and be more like the Chinese.
Can we find somewhere in the middle, like Latvia? It doesn't.
Or we just insist that children wear water wings when they're using any app from Facebook. Now, again, we get to the issues of 13 right now is the current age limit. There's lots of kids who are under 13 using Facebook apps, such as the Big Blue app and Instagram and others. but should 18 be that new age? I mean, good luck trying to enforce that. Of course, there's the whole TikTok issue that now, but just specifically on this story regarding the suicidal ideation and whatnot. It doesn't seem to be so much as regarding cyberbullying, which is a whole other thing that we've touched on in the past. But a lot of it is just the whole comparison situation where, you're comparing your rehearsals to other people's performance out there. You can see even there's an issue called Instagram face that has evolved where you see lots of young women are starting to look similar, the way they shape their eyebrows, the type of injections they get, Botox use, all these sorts of things because of the influence of a lot of Instagram influencers. And it's when you see everyone living their best life with their beautiful kids or their beautiful vacation or the perfect brunch and so on and so forth, and you're sitting at home in your basement in the dark eating Doritos, like crying.
You okay, Tristan?
And this is the kind of thing that people, they comparing themselves to everyone's perfect lives. Will?
Well, there's been studies too about psychologists testing people before and after using Facebook, and they find, I mean, again, it's a bit qualitative because they ask them. It's not like they're measuring something scientific other than just compiling, qualitative results. But on average, people express that they're more depressed after being on Facebook than before being on Facebook.
Exactly. So whether Facebook and then Instagram, apparently, again from the studies, is even more like that as well because Instagram is even more performative and just the perfect people. So just a couple of stats before we move on to the next Facebook horror show is that what was the percentages? One internal Facebook presentation said among teens who reported suicidal thoughts, 13% of British users and 6% of American users traced the issue to Instagram. So again, this is a self-reported kind of thing. Again, 13, so double the rate of British users. You could, maybe attribute that partly to the climate as well too. There's a whole lot of things that, can get mashed together in people's self-reporting. But then the other interesting thing is 32% of teen girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse. And then, and that rate was 14% for boys. So you can, chalk that up to the nature of the user base, the kind of content that people are consuming, who they're following. And I think definitely it's important for parents to be aware of what kids are doing on their phones, the kind of content they're engaging with, the type of people they're engaging with, and how that's making them feel about themselves, and just having open conversations about this stuff, taking an interest in what it is that they're looking at, and and having some gut checks and some reality checks on some of these things. It's like, oh, that's interesting that you saw a Kardashian post this. Like, do you think that their life is always like that? Do you think it's actually that perfect? And so on. I mean, some of them, yeah. It's like, which one's a billionaire now, thanks to our cosmetics brand? But yeah. So again, this is one of these really sticky issues, but it just shows you that Facebook's aware of these things, and they're still. I mean, they've got shareholders to answer to, but if they don't regulate themselves and they don't offer more tools for parents, and they've been doing some things in that respect, but the government's going to step in for them, whether they like or not, unless they're able to police themselves. But speaking of police, go ahead, Will.
Oh, I was going to say, it's like the NFL with concussions. What do you do? How do you get that out of the game? How do you weed it out? So
it's endemic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of self-policing, the Facebook has an oversight board that they appointed in the last year or so, and they want Facebook to explain its own rules for VIPs. Apparently, certain public figures, VIPs on Facebook, can post things, and very controversial things, outside of certain certain category, anything that's like terribly explicit or whatnot, will get banned instantly. But certain things that would get banned by regular users can remain up for a day or two from certain public figures, VIPs, whether they're politicians or even some celebrities. And Facebook actually has a policy on this because they figure, public figures are a bit more trusted and they're not going to do things quite as crazy. What's the story here, Graham?
Well, essentially looking at a few people who have been treated different, I think, than Facebook probably would have wanted people to believe they were over the last little while. We were speaking specifically of former president, who persisted on the platform because even Twitter had the same thing, newsworthiness, which basically was an excuse to say this person is on our platform, they're driving a lot of traffic, and we're terrified that if we do anything to this person, it's going to negatively affect our audiences. It literally took, almost a second civil war to get this fella off both these platforms. But now the group is looking at it and saying, okay, we need to be more transparent about our process for VIPs, to which the actual board of Facebook went, what? Was that word you just used, Trent? That's a show, isn't it? They have no idea. And so right now, the oversight board is basically, I wonder how much longer they're going to last. Because I think really what it is it's jingling the keys for legislators saying, look, we've got oversight and there are conversations that are happening, but they're desperately just trying to get through to their next layer of profitability. Facebook's really in trouble right now. When we take a look at today alone with the things that are happening that are essentially stepping in between them and their real clients, which are the advertisers, this is getting worse and worse and worse. And I think, unfortunately, go fast, break things, and being in so many different areas, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but being in so many different areas, this oversight board is basically trying to tell the board of Facebook, here's actually how you can not be a bunch of jerks for the entire internet. And I think the board's probably looking at it going, when the next Trump comes along, how are we going to handle it in such a way where we don't alienate our audience and we don't seem like the bad guys to the people who know that we're looking like bad guys right now? This is not a position I envy.
So if we want to help fund Facebook's legal challenges, their battles with the government and so on, maybe we should all go out and pick up one of their updated Facebook portal. They've got the Portal Go, which is a portable version of their in-home video conferencing system. And this one is only $199 US, and Portal Plus, the larger, fancier version, for $349. Jamie, do you want one of these in your home?
It's actually if we separate Facebook from Portal, it's kind of a neat little idea. I know with my parents, they would probably, my mom would probably actually enjoy having one of these. But because she's actually most connected with other people via Facebook. Facebook Messenger is actually it's quite profound in how many people it actually connects compared to other, even with phone numbers. People don't have anybody's phone numbers anymore. So from that point of view, it seems like a kind of a neat little gadget. But again, with Facebook being so invasive in people's lives, it's just another tentacle, another tendril into people's lives to keep people connected in the way to serve ads to them. And I don't know, does this thing throw ads up on the screen? I'm not sure how it actually works.
I don't believe so, but I think one of the things, the disconnect between the chattering classes, such as our tech people like ourselves, and a lot of regular folks, like we got to remember, like Facebook is pushing 3 billion monthly active users at this point. And they keep growing, despite the fact that some people say, oh, they're dying, et cetera, et cetera. They keep growing and growing, and that's even like the big blue app, like the main Facebook network, and it's Instagram and WhatsApp aside. So for a lot of regular folks, I mean, that is the majority of how they interact with the internet, staying in touch with friends and family and whatnot. So when you walk into Best Buy and you see, this easy to use video conferencing service that you can put on your counter, and it's a dedicated device. It's not nearly as complicated nor as expensive as, say, an iPad or another tablet. Right. So, I mean, if you can do all these things on larger, more expensive devices, but, if you don't need that much, or if it's, too complicated for your grandmother, you just plop one of these on there. I mean, but that's the tension, right? There's a lot of people like us who are like, oh, Facebook privacy, blah, Mark Zuckerberg, blah. But, a lot of regular folks is like, oh yeah, I use Facebook every day. It's great. That's how I, see my friends' kids' photos and whatnot. Now I can talk to, Auntie Ethel with it. Cool.
Even the normies are starting to push back a little bit. I'm finding it. I'm talking to people and not hearing a lot of good things. This is for $99. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. I mean, here's the thing. Like for $349, you can get the brand new iPad, which does do all of the other things. And if you got a friend or a relative who really it's a little too much for them, you can buy an old one off the internet and put in guide. But that's more work for you. For this right here. Now, I mean, if this were just Facebook Messenger, I'd probably say a 10-foot barge pole, like 11-foot barge pole, not even with a 10. But this also does Microsoft Teams, which
your other favorite.
Famously makes a lot of computers just grunt. And so not 99. But it does Teams, it does Zoom, it does the other Facebook Messenger app, WhatsApp. Would I buy one of these? again, not for myself, would I buy one for my parents? Actually, you know what? My 71 and 72-year-old parents have figured out emojis. They get FaceTime. My dad sent me a message entirely in emojis the other day. Thankfully, there were no eggplants. But I was like, "What? When did you learn this?"
But your parents are one up on mine. My mother referred to email address the other day as somebody's email address as their computer phone number.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong. You know, I'm gonna give that one to her. That is a perfect internet phone number or computer phone number, perfectly valid name for an email address.
Will, if you want to make that prophecy come 100% true, give her your username at your IP address for your mail server, and then it will seem even more like a phone number for her.
Yes.
You know, these don't look like bad hardware. I'm curious to know what the profit margin is. Like, is this a loss leader? Because honestly, like looking at the 2140 by 1440 display, that is not a bad 14-inch display for $349. I'm a little tempted just to have one around the house.
I think they do okay with. I think they do okay with it, Greg, because you have to enter your SIN number in before you start.
Fair. Yep.
That's how they get you.
Yeah.
There's always an angle. Okay. Well, speaking of other internet giants making things for consumers, Amazon's new Kindle Paperwhite adds a bigger screen, longer battery life, and USB-C. It also has an adjustable color temperature for night reading, so you're not blasting your eyes with blue light just before bed. So I have a fondness for the idea of Kindles. We got a Kindle for my wife back in 2007 when they were only available in the US. They came with the 3G modem built in, so you could, or was it, maybe it was one older than 3G modem. And he had some sort of, WhisperNet. It had a CDMA connection because books don't take up a lot of data, and you could easily use a wireless connection anywhere you were pretty much with cell coverage to download books to your Kindle. And that was, I couldn't actually find it. I went to grab it out of the cupboard to show off because it had a full keyboard and everything too. It was kind of a Frankenstein device, but Amazon keeps, they keep iterating every couple of years, and they've got the Oasis, but the Paperwhite is the one that a lot of people go to now for the optimal price and features. And, e-ink is great, low battery. This has got a 6.8-inch e-ink display, finally moving over to USB-C. A little bit quicker, and weeks of battery life. So, if you're going on a trip, if people still do that, instead of taking a stack of books with you, you can load up dozens, if not hundreds of books on this dedicated sort of device. So my question for you, and I'll start with you, Will, do you read paper books, or do you read on your iPad, your new iPad Pro, or do you have any e-readers in your world still? They're like the Kobo. I think Sony got out of the business a while back, but what's your preference when it comes to reading?
I got an old e-reader from my dad, maybe about 10 years ago or 6 years ago. My brother-in-law just loves his e-reader. He's just a voracious reader, and he prefers the e-reader. He finds it easier on his eyes. I personally use my iPad for comic books a lot, but there's something sometimes where especially with trade paperbacks, again, being more of a comic book reader than a novel reader these days, even though, don't tell my professors at university because I did a degree in English literature, but yeah, I mostly read comic books these days, or articles, like tech articles or music articles, but yeah, I use my iPad, but I also just actually like the tactile sensation of actually having a book sometimes.
How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm a book guy. I've tried the e-readers. We used to have a Kobo years ago. I haven't looked at the new ones yet, so I don't know how much better they are, but yeah, I'm somebody, I don't read a lot anymore. Because I usually read a paragraph or I read a page, and then I get a little sleepy and I realize, I don't remember what I just read. So if I do it, so I generally, if I go away somewhere, if I'm camping or just somewhere where I can get away from the electronics, I like to get away from the electronics. I like to get the physical hard book or soft cover book, whatever it is, and go for it that way. So that's my go-to.
It's funny that you mentioned nodding off. One of the reasons that I went from full-size iPad to iPad mini a number of years ago is because I found if I fell asleep while reading something on the full-size iPad, it hurt your face when it's slammed down on it.
I was trying not to out you, but that was exactly what I was referencing.
That's where the new iPad Pro comes in really handy if you've got the new keyboard case, because you can basically just lie it on your chest and sort of angle it at you, and then if you fall asleep, you just wake up and just sort of just hang in there like the sword of Damocles.
Perfect. What's your e-reader experience, Gray?
I love what you said earlier. I'm enamored with the idea of an e-reader because I am. I love the idea of them. I've owned several, and it's like you got those hobbies, right? That you're just like you do for a little while, and then you put the stuff on the shelf, and you come back a couple years later, like, wow, man, I probably should have sold that a little while ago, huh? Yeah, there you are. And the thing that I found about my Kindle, I loved it. It's great to take on trips, and when I remember to, and usually when I take it on the trip, and I remember to take it on the trip, I've forgotten to charge it. And of course, it was a micro USB at the time, which, like everything else is Lightning. Oh, it's crazy. So most of my stuff now is USB-C. So I'm kind of looking at this and going, I really don't need this at all, but I kind of don't need this at all, but still want to. I'm not going to buy this, but I want to. I love the fact that they're saying let's do 60 minutes in fresh water or 3 minutes in seawater. So don't dump it at the beach. That's what the Oasis is for, I think, which is the one that still comes with cellular connectivity, which is great. It's still free. But like looking at it, all the prices that they've got, this is the thing that just blows my mind. It makes me hate it a little bit. It's always the ad-supported price. I bought the ad-supported Kindle way back when, and I didn't realize how obnoxious I'd find it. It just didn't seem like it's one step to like put the beautiful paper book down, which they take up too much room in my life anyway, but which is fine. Get them from a library. That's what libraries are there for. But then I would pick this thing up and it was trying to sell me something. I was just like, you sullied this. Yeah. Really don't like it. So I've never even looked at the ad-supported price. I won't buy it, but I'm going to. Anyone who has one, I'm going to be like, hey, can I take a look at your Kindle? Wow, that's really beautiful. Precisely.
Dog agrees.
I miss ads in comic books personally. I used to love the Sea Monkeys, which we brought up before, Jamie, and the guy with the exercise book and all that.
Charles
stuff.
Atlas.
Yeah, the X-ray glasses.
Yeah, X-ray specs. You can see through skin and ladies' clothes. It's like false advertising. So the ad-supported model knocks $20 off the price. So I would recommend to anyone that can scrape together that extra $20, it is well worth it because there are no sea monkeys involved, unfortunately. The new Paperwhite starts at $139 US, which is $10 up from the 2018 version. So this isn't something they're updating every year, but every few years, because this is a pretty mature space at this point. The signature edition starts at $189. And now there's also a Kindle Paperwhite Kids Edition for $159 US, which includes a Paperwhite, a kid-friendly cover, a year of Amazon Kids Plus, and a 2-year extended replacement program, similar to the existing bundle Amazon has for the base Kindle model. So, of course, you got to love the extended warranties for people who are more likely to damage their devices there. So it seems that we're unanimous here. We tend to like the idea of a dedicated e-reader, but we just can't be bothered.
What's that say about us?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, Jamie, I know you and I have talked about this for decades now. Like trends were toward convergence. We were all waiting for that magical day where all our devices, our MP3 players, our PDAs, our phones, maybe our books could all converge into one thing. Mm-hmm. And now there are options to splice those off into different devices again. You can game on smartphones and tablets, but there's still a lot of people that like the Nintendo Switch and never plug it into their TV. They use it solely as a portable device. So it really depends on what the value proposition is for those extra devices that you're going to add back into your life. So they really need to offer a compelling amount of value, especially if it's something that's bright yellow and has a crank. That's next year, though. We'll come back to that.
It's a little hurtful. It's okay, though.
Speaking of the future, SpaceX launched their first all-civilian Inspiration 4 mission into space, and they broadcasted it live. Did any of you guys happen to catch this? Because I meant to, and then I forgot.
I did. There was a ukulele.
Tell us all about it, Gray.
Oh, well, essentially,
What is this?
So basically, they launched this capsule up, 4 civilians in there, orbiting the Earth. Amazing! Like, this is awesome. This is the future of space, because you're going to have rich people who are hopefully paying for the development of things so that the rest of us can get up into space. I do want to point out something that I think is really cool here. Elon promised that we would have full autonomous driving at some point this year. It just didn't happen on Earth. This whole thing was completely automated, flown by wire from the ground. It didn't stop the crew from mucking with the touchscreens. Honestly, and this is where I think SpaceX missed an opportunity. If I were them, I would have had to code something in there where the moment they started to touch with it, give it 30 seconds and then just blue screen the whole thing just for a moment. But they missed that. It's heartbreaking. There's a universe where that happened. There's a what if where that happened. It was hilarious. But this is great. Like, we're looking at this and saying, space is there for all of us. And currently, right now, there are very, very, very few of us that have a lot of the money. So let's take some of that money and use it to develop space for the rest of us. I mean, we're doing that right now with our taxes and our space programs. It's not being done the best way that it could, and hopefully we'll be getting better at that. But this is a good way to see if we can actually get more people interested in getting off this rock. Because I've said it before, and I'll say it again, we're one bad space rock away from not being a species anymore. So,
and who knows how long Bruce Willis is going to be around to save us? So.
Right, and what's his name there? I forgot it. They just ride the missile. No.
Peter Sellers.
Steve Buscemi is not the guy that we want to send up there, because clearly didn't weather it well the first time.
Gotcha. So this was a little different as opposed to millionaires and billionaires having these kind of vanity trips. This, as you alluded to, Gray, was funded by billionaire Jared Isaacman, who sent 4 other people up. He was the crew commander, but he raised. This was all part of a fundraising initiative he had as well. So in conjunction with this, they raised over $200 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and they specialize in childhood cancer. And they just had some regular people from diverse backgrounds just to celebrate space. So these people didn't have to pay to go on. But if you read some of the follow-up articles, and of course they've been doing the media rounds and whatnot, these folks have been totally blown away by this whole experience. And it seems like one of those things where it could go horribly wrong. This first question the interviewer asks here is like, show of hands, who would still like to be up there? And they all 4 of them raise their hands. They wanted to stay longer. But can you imagine if, as we know, astronaut is the most dangerous job in the world by the numbers. And this could have gone so wrong. So they must have been pretty confident in the tech to get them there and back. And then they landed, as far as we can tell, reasonably, what am I, scratch free? I'm not trying to think, like unscathed. Unscathed.
Landing you can walk away from is a good landing, and they walked away from it just fine. So it's a great landing.
Exactly.
Did everybody hear about the more humorous part of the trip? Was the lack of efficient facilities? Apparently, the technology that SpaceX has for relieving oneself up there is not necessarily up to par. So that's something that they're going to be improving on future missions.
It's funny because they cover that in the Apple series, From the Earth to the Moon. Not From the Earth to the Moon. What is it? From Mankind.
From Mankind, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And it just seems to be, this is going to be a refrain, I think, for us as a species, as we find, zero gravity, microgravity, different gravities. Our plumbing's built for one type of planet. And when you're not on it, I think things go badly.
Well, if a billionaire selected you to go up into space for 3 days in orbit, would you take that offer?
Oh, that'd be a tough one. I'd probably give my seat to Gray. I think there's people that want to do it more than me. I think it's interesting, but it's not a negative thing. It's not like, anything against people who want to go. I just don't have a big desire personally, but it might be cool, but I have to say it's not high on my list.
You're just saying, playing the odds, right? Why take unnecessary risks there? What about you, Jamie?
Oh yeah, I think it's if that's how I got to go, that's how I got to go.
Yes.
It's really it seems like if I was just offered a trip up into space, I'd do it. And yeah, if things were going to end, they were going to probably end very quickly, so I wouldn't know what was
Yeah.
going on anyway. So it's not really a big deal.
So long, wife and kids.
Yep,
They're doing fine.
they're old
great,
now.
you know,
Yeah, they're old now. It's all good.
And I mean, to me, the thing is, and this is just, if it ever happens, I promise you I will do this. On re-entry, I'm going to do Al Pacino from The Godfather 3.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
That will be my one giant leap.
I mean, if we're getting to hypotheticals, I'd rather see, the Beastie Boys back together again, through time and space and death. If we're getting into hypothetical things that I'd want to do or see.
All right.
That's like a hard left turn.
Noted.
Yeah. Okay. I'm putting that down.
All right. Well, one guy who is still alive is Steve Wozniak, who I had the pleasure of meeting a number of years ago, Apple co-founder, and like other, I don't know if he's a billionaire, just maybe he might merely be a multi-millionaire, but he has started his own space company, but for a sort of a different type of cause, which I think is kind of cool. Greg, can you talk to us about what Woz is up to nowadays?
Yeah, so I mean, he's been doing a lot of different things, kind of holding Apple's feet to the fire over a few privacy-related things, a few hardware-related things, which is great because he's one of the originals. Going on to be the inspiration for the catalyst in Ready Player One. Steve's kind of like, he's this big personality that I think carries a lot of weight for a lot of us when he speaks. And so looking at this, he's got a company called Privateer Space, which this like brings images of Wing Commander back to my mind. Mark Hamill and Malcolm McDowell were in those at one point. The games, not the movies. It was Freddie Prinze Jr. in the movie.
Exactly.
But the idea here is, taking a look at space right now. We've talked about it a bit before. Is there's a lot of stuff that's up there, I think, that doesn't need to be. And so while we're not hearing all of the details about this, it looks like they may actually be going up to help deal with some of the challenges that we're seeing in junk left in space. And that's something I could really get behind. Looking up right now, we've seen Starlink, a bunch of new satellites come online in the last month. And as a budding astronomer, it's really challenging to think that, as a species, there are, again, a select few who are putting things in between us and, these celestial bodies that have guided us around the planet for 3 millennia. So sounds like a really cool idea. It also kind of conjures some images of The Expanse, and the idea that space could actually be a working man's place. That we could actually be able to go up there, and it could be your job. But maybe you take a ferry up and you're cleaning up space junk, just in low Earth orbit. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, this a growing problem over the last number of decades with successive space missions, both public and private, is not everything when it's done with comes back down to Earth, and sometimes that's planned, sometimes it's not planned. So you have all this junk circling the Earth that isn't even being used anymore. Sometimes there are little collisions, mid-orbit collisions of stuff. Then you have hundreds, if not thousands, of little pieces, any one of which, when traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, if not faster, can do serious damage to a satellite, a manned capsule, or a space station or something like that. And you're going to have a bad time if that happens. So I think the more that can be done to help clean up the various planes of orbit around the Earth would only be a good thing, especially since we have more and more ambitions to put things into orbit to help us on Earth, but also, when we're trying to look beyond this junk out to space to do research and so on. So, it's like there's probably like those 6-pack can rings floating around up there, wrapped around a seagull's neck or something. Those orbiting seagulls.
Sorry,
that's just what humans do, right?
In a related thing, what you remember the movie Gravity? What was the MacGuffin there? Was it asteroids or was it space junk? I
think it was asteroids.
Asteroids? Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
It was asteroids. No, it was asteroids. I think that actually hit something that burst into debris, which then burst other stuff into debris, and then everything in orbit just destroyed itself.
The butterfly flapped its wings in Peking, and Sandra Bullock is now orbiting space and talking to ourselves.
And then Jeff Goldblum looked into the camera.
So yeah, I think it's hard to argue with this whether or not it actually will succeed. I mean, we always got to look at the business model. Like we've talked about recycling in the past, right? It's all about the business model. If this stuff can be salvaged and they can find a market for it, otherwise you're going to be looking for donations for this kind of initiative. And it costs a lot of money to get rockets and gear into space to play trash collector. So we'll see if this happens, but we're going to be paying attention to privateer space and see what unfolds next. Speaking of next, NASA unveils landing site on the moon for ice hunting Viper rover, which will touch down in late 2023, just west of Nobile, a crater near the moon's south pole. Great. What's going on here? What is NASA up to at the south pole of the moon?
We're following the plot of For All Mankind on so many things here. So essentially, we've thought about this for a while. We're looking at Mars, obviously, for ice. But if we can find ice on the moon, they actually do this in For All Mankind. You're looking at a lot of different things. There's helium-3 on the moon, which, if we do get fusion running, could be a great power source. But also, if we find water, literally, you can split that apart into oxygen, which we need to breathe, and hydrogen, which we can burn. So these are two very valuable things for us. And so they go on this search for ice in For All Mankind. And we won't tell you if it happens, but hey, there's 2 seasons, so maybe you can figure that out. But this is a really great way to go and take a look for that. Now, in the show, they send Joel Kinnaman, and now they're going to send a robot. Now, Joel Kinnaman looks a little bit like the Terminator at the best of times. So, again, life imitating art. The one thing that I would like is if they do put this thing up on the moon, put a GPS on it with Joel Kinnaman's voice. That, to me, is chef's kiss.
Rick Flag on the moon. Who knew it?
I just love the names that they come up with things like
Viper.
Quantum, Steel Cobra.
The Viper is actually quite nice. It comes with 2 subwoofers and a whole sound system. It's a boss rover as far as the moon goes.
So the what they're hoping is that they can find actual ice or actual sort of evidence of water, as opposed that's not in like, I think one of the options they said is they don't want to find it in mud, because that makes it very very difficult to use. So the data Viper returns will provide lunar scientists around the world with further insight into our moon's cosmic origin, evolution, and history, and will also help inform future Artemis missions to the moon and beyond by enabling us to better understand the lunar environment in these previously unexplored areas hundreds of thousands of miles away. So yeah, they've got this little rover that they're going to send around to look for water. So just like we've got rovers on Mars, this is a little closer to home. It's nice that we're going back to the moon, which is a little more easily accessible to do some research, because I think it's agreed that the moon would be the jumping off point for a lot of other future missions. Jamie, what do you think? What do you think the odds on? You're a gambling man. Do you think there's actually a usable amount of water, in your scientific / gambling opinion, on the moon for us to use for future missions?
Well, I don't think there's much of a gamble. I think in a bunch of the surveys of the moon from the Earth, they found lots of water on Mars, so that's there for sure in the polar caps and elsewhere. And I think on Mars there is some Martian, or not, sorry, on the moon, there's sublunar pockets of ice from what they've been able to determine from just the science. So I think they're really trying to find, from what I understand, is the largest amount of it where they can find a good chunk of it. But I think there's water is sort of everywhere. But like you say, there might not be a drop to drink if it's encased in a whole bunch of mud. But if we can find big pockets of water, which is doubtful, my guess would be that it's really just incorporated within the lunar rock, which is a horrible bit of material to work with as well. It's very jagged and really rough on machinery. So you can see why it would be a real problem for them to mine out of anything than just pure water.
It's the dust, I think, that also causes a great deal of issue, because again, it's corrosive, it's abrasive. And they dealt with this with a lot of different things. I mean, that said, if they were to find it in mud, it doesn't make it unusable. It just means that there is a step there that requires energy that may make it less valuable to us. I mean, when we take a look at how we think the moon formed. It was basically something that slammed into the protoplanet that was Earth. And was there transference of some of these materials? Hopefully there was, which would be really cool to see. I mean, to your point, this would give us the fuel. It would give us the oxygen. It's the thing that we're looking for.
Now, Mars, on the other hand, it turns out if they want to build some permanent space stations there, we maybe could make concrete-like materials from our own blood and urine. Just mix that in with some Martian space dust, and there you go. We're building habitats. There you go, Matt Damon. Thoughts?
Proof of
We're
concept,
bringing it with
I
us. We
guess.
might as well, right? Like,
Well, we are like natural like processing units, so why not take
We are,
advantage?
but there's some. I'm not sure what if it's the moisture that they're looking for, or the phosphorus in the urine. I didn't really get into the actual details of what the actual structure is comprised of, but I'm sure there's. That's going to be a lot of people doing a lot of business up there to create a lot of stuff. So, so they probably can find a much more efficient way of taking the resources on the planet and modifying those. So I think it's maybe just, hey, this is a neat idea. We can make this work, and let's make a news story out of it.
Freeze dry those beans and send them up.
Yeah, exactly.
This says scientific press release written all over it, though. Like, basically, somebody was like, okay, look, we need to get some attention on this program. We're going to be recycling everything that's up there. Mm-hmm. What can we say that's going to get people interested? I don't know. Tell them we're going to make bricks out of crap. Done.
That looks like a viewfinder. What are they building, cameras?
Yeah. So apparently the idea of using animal blood as a binder for mortar goes back to at least medieval times. So that, in combination with urine, sweat, or even tears, as you miss your family back on Earth and that you may never ever see again. I think the idea here is just driving home the message that life on Mars is going to be hard, and they got to recycle absolutely everything. I mean, to a certain extent, you're going to be drinking your own urine to a certain extent, because they'll just purify it, and so whatever you're not drinking, you're making into bricks. And they even show some of the the little pellets that they've been able to generate here. So I mean, to your points, fellas, that's it's going to have a lot of eating, a lot of crying, a lot of sweating, a lot of
chili, man. It's got
literally
many of those things.
And blood, sweat, and tears. It's right there. Next up, I think they probably had that in mind. Maybe they're just trolling us. So, I mean, it's so hard. All this work on Mars is so hard because some scientists are saying that Mars may simply be too small to host life, and just not enough magnetic field, not enough gravity. So the red planet wasn't capable of hanging on to essential things like water. There's evidence of maybe of dry ice on the Martian surface, but not liquid water per se. Of course, it's so cold there, but doesn't have much of an atmosphere, doesn't have much of a magnetic field. So it's pretty inhospitable in a number of ways. But if you want to see just how desolate it is, NASA actually has Explore with Perseverance available for us to go and check out online, where you can look at the various views of what the Mars rover can see currently, and then as it moves around, it's going to take more photos. So this is basically like kind of like Google Street View, but on the surface of another planet. Jamie, when we were nerdy kids back in the 80s, like, did you ever think we would be able to do something like this? How does this make you feel inside?
I kind of did. I kind of hoped. I remember a long time ago thinking about these video games that we had, and how if things progress, if things get better and better, we're gonna get to the point where it's gonna feel like it's real. And so I always had hopes that we would get to something like this. So it's not surprising. It's been incremental changes for this kind of stuff. So it's not as amazing as it would have been if it was dropped into us 25, 30, 35 years ago. But it's still, it's really fantastic what we can do these days. Yeah.
It's actually the low poly counts that we're seeing is similar to the video games we grew up with.
That's true.
Just a lot of jagged rocks. It's like we're playing asteroids or Battlezone.
Yeah.
So this leads us, to the whole idea of Mars. There's a lot of attention on Mars from Elon Musk and others, and depending on what the research actually teaches us, some people are thinking in the back of their mind, maybe Venus is a better match, even though its atmosphere is horribly toxic and it's super hot, but there may be more to work with there in terms of raw materials. Gray, again, as our official momentous astronomy correspondent, given your current studies, what can you tell us about the angle that people are taking with Venus at the moment?
Well, the interesting thing with Venus is, and we've got this article that goes along with this. We found a lot of interesting things about the atmosphere, and so Ray and I attended a talk. God, it's got about 2.5, 3 years back now, talking about whether we would be terraforming Mars or Venus, or trying to colonize Mars or Venus. And the fascinating thing that I learned at the time is there's actually a small layer of Venus's atmosphere which they believe has breathable oxygen. And because of the nature of the gases that surround it, you could actually, as you're kind of coming into, talk about angles, coming into sort of the approach on the planet, if you come in at the right angle, you could have essentially almost like an inflatable cavity inside whatever it is that you're trying to bring in there, which would capture those lighter than, not just air, but lighter than the other gases that are surrounding the surface of Venus, and end up with a cloud city that looks like Bespin from Star Wars. This checks all the buttons for me. Checks all the boxes for me. Very, very cool stuff. I mean, Venus is terrifying, right? The surface temperature melts lead. It's not, you don't.
Well, will it melt steel beams?
Yeah, you're not going skydiving on Venus. At least, you can go once. So fascinating planet. But looking at this and trying to figure out what's there, because Mars, we can land a probe on there, and we can fly a helicopter off the surface, and it's not going to melt. Whereas Venus, really, it's this terrifying planet that just below the surface will absolutely kill you and I. But there may be life there that's not of our type. So, I mean, it's exciting to see what it is they're doing with it. Given the difference between the two, if I was able to go outside, and we're looking at physics. Physics is what's holding you up there. It's hard to argue with them. And breathe the atmosphere versus Mars, which, if you've seen the ending to the original Total Recall, it's kind of an eye-popping finish. That's not the way I want to go. So Moon, very little atmosphere, nothing really to speak of. Mars, a little bit more, but still not enough. And if we're gonna make those places breathable, we're basically having everything that we're trying not to do to Earth right now, we have to do to the Moon and Mars in order to make that work. Whereas with Venus, there's a possibility we don't. And that could actually work out really in our favor.
And given that it's a similar size, it's a lot closer to Earth in mass and hopefully gravity as well. So, I think the problem is it's just so opaque in a number of ways, not the least of which is visually just being able to see what is beneath the atmosphere, because as probes that have landed on there haven't lasted very long. The Russians have sent probes to the surface of Mars as well. It's so Jamie, what did we learn from The Expanse as to the nature of life on Venus?
I can't remember what was happening on Venus. Most of it was actually in outer space. But one thing I can say is that it makes no sense to go and try and terraform either Mars nor Venus.
Killjoy.
There's just, we have this planet that we've evolved on, and it's actually in pretty good shape. We still got to put some work into it to keep it the way it is, but it's going to be way more efficient to actually keep what we have and try and make it usable. And then I think maybe a la Interstellar, build some interstellar or interplanetary craft that we could live on and harvest the sun that way. But to try and take a planet and make it livable, the amount of resources and energy that would be involved in that in the near or even somewhat distant future, I think is it's all pie in the sky kind of stuff. It's fun to think about. It's fun to have the sci-fi like The Expanse to kind of consider those things. But
it's kind of fun. What's kind of fun is we actually have Matt Damon on either end of the spectrum, right? Because you have The Martian, where he's trying to terraform a planet, but ends up ultimately failing and having to leave it. And then you have Titan AE, where he plays the lead character, which they do end up terraforming a planet.
That's a deep cut.
Right?
Well, we also have Interstellar,
where Matt Damon
There you go.
No
right.
spoilers.
So yeah, I know. I
Right in
didn't
the
say
middle.
anything. I
Right
just
in the
said Matt
middle.
Damon. I just said
Oh,
Matt Damon.
Scotch.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Yeah, Matt Damon.
So, speaking of breathing life into old, dead, suffocating
man.
things, the tragedy of Macbeth. Joel Cohen has shed his brother. Well, Ethan Cohen has decided to not make any more films. So Joel Cohen is his first film. He's taking on Shakespeare with the tragedy of Macbeth, which with Denzel Washington playing the title role and Frances McDormand as amazing casting as Lady Macbeth here. Will, you as our resident English literature correspondent for Momentous, what were your thoughts when you first heard of this and or saw this trailer, which looks, I mean, the witches here, like...
Yeah. I mean, just amazing cinematography, and the Coen brothers, their black and white movies were always very stunning. Barton Fink and stuff like that. I'm a big Shakespeare fan. I studied Shakespeare a lot at university. And Macbeth is one of my favorites. So I'm very much looking forward to this, and it looks outstanding. Great pedigree, great casting. So yeah, I'm all in.
Anyone else?
I hate
Sometimes
Macbeth. I'm not going to watch it.
It's because they force people to read it in high school.
The problem with Macbeth is
Exactly.
that it spoils Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
No man of woman born.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great. What about you?
I'm
down
excited.
for this?
A24, I'll watch anything they have to put out.
Yeah.
And so reminds me I need to go and watch The Green Knight. But this, looks great.
Now, I wonder if it is actually presented in 4:3 as shown in the trailer there. They're kind of pulling, was that The Lighthouse? It was the other one recently.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Now, the thing that the thing that
So
bums me
good.
out about this is that it's going, straight to Apple TV Plus. I don't know if it's got a theatrical release
I
at
thought
all.
it said it had a
Did
brief theatrical release in December and then was going to Apple
Where?
TV in
It
January.
better not only be like in like 3 theaters, just here, there, and like in New York and LA and whatnot to
coffee
qualify
house
for
in
the
San
Oscars.
Francisco.
Yeah, to
Brigadoon.
qualify for the Oscars. But like this is the kind of thing that I would really love to see on the much larger screen than even Gray has at his house. So,
Well, just get a
Anyhow.
Fresnel lens and put it in front of it.
exactly. What else we got going here? We're almost at the end. Oh, a little bit of news that strikes home for me. Richard H. Kirk, co-founder of Cabaret Voltaire. I just learned this morning that he passed away at the young age of 65. He's got a tremendous body of work behind him. Not only the Cabaret Voltaire releases since the mid-70s, but solo work under literally dozens of pseudonyms and his own name as well. I would encourage anyone who may be interested in Richard H. Kirk or Cabaret Voltaire to check out, there's all sorts of playlists you'll find on Spotify, Apple Music, and other places, or even Ask Me. You could start with the mid-'80s hits like Sensoria or I Want You. A good gateway into the oeuvre of Cabaret Voltaire. You get into the old stuff, it gets a little weird. The newer stuff went more electronic, instrumental, and ambient to a certain extent. And then Richard H. Kirk stuff is like all over the place. Really fascinating artist, taken way too soon. Did not suffer fools gladly, was not into nostalgia, promised to never do retro shows, play the hits or anything like that. Kind of a curmudgeon in that respect. And someone that I'll never get to see live, unfortunately, even if he wasn't going to play the hits. And that makes me a little sad. But, there's been an outpouring of grief and kudos from, bands like OMD and the Orbital, New Order, sort of bands with their pure electronic or electronic pop, synth pop and rock that, Cabaret Voltaire is one of those bands that kind of always was under the radar for a lot of people. So, yeah, I remember Jamie back in like 1985, 86, playing you a little bit from the Covenant and the Sword of the Arm of the Lord. And he said, yeah, these guys might be big someday. And it's like, well, they never were really.
No.
But, they kept going. And Stephen Mallender, the vocalist, he's still doing a number of solo projects and side projects as well too.
It took me 3 years to finally ask you
Mm-hmm.
because I tried searching Cadbury Voltaire for 3 years before. I'm like, I'm looking for this. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Featuring Richie Rich on vocals.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
that's
3 years of
caramel.
embarrassment that I'm confessing to right there. So, but thank you for the introduction. And rest in peace.
I just have to say, I was looking up just because the story came up, the list of his pseudonyms. Holy
Ridiculous.
cow! It's on another level. As someone who's come up with a couple pseudonyms for my music, hey, this guy must be he was pumping them out. Holy cow!
One of my favorites is Richard H. Kirk meets the truck bombers of suburbia. That one even had his name in it. But and I forgot to mention, I'm actually wearing a shirt that our common friend Sam, it's a bootleg Cabaret Voltaire shirt that's in triple XL. He just got it from me last year, and that was way after my weight loss. So I don't know what he was thinking there, but I wear it as a muumuu now. So
It's airy.
It's a comfort shirt.
Exactly.
It's a comfort shirt. Yeah.
So speaking of electronic music, and Richard H. Kirk did some DJing himself. Will, you found an interesting little product to bring to our attention just before we wrap up here.
Yeah,
What's this?
It's a little device that was just released recently. It's about
And Hub.
Yeah, so it's about $200. It's particularly targeted at DJs who also use DVS software. So that's the digital software that allows you to use devices and connect your computer and use your various playlists and digital electronic music. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer, but it's also kind of groundbreaking at the same time. It's an actual laptop stand that many DVS DJs use, but it also has a USB hub right in. So I have a separate USB hub that kind of just sits there in the way because a lot of times my devices, like my Rain 12s, they actually connect via USB. They don't connect with audiovisual cables. They actually connect to the computer via USB. So instead of having an external hub, bing, bang, boom, you just put it on this laptop stand, which you need anyways, and you got a powered USB-C stand.
So this is really relevant to my interests. I DJ'd a live show on Twitch on Sunday, and was sitting here struggling for USB ports because not only do you need the port for my tractor controller, but I also need an audio interface, and that's really pushing the limits of the things that I've got connectable here.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at this, I'm just looking to see where to buy. Okay, I'm going to be picking one of these up. This is great.
And Tom Lee, I think.
Yep.
But the other thing too is that Gray, you probably know a laptop stands for DJ equipment aren't cheap. They're already going to be like $120 to $150, and this is $200. Yeah,
this is reasonable. Yep. Good find.
So Will, you also had a little project in your ongoing beat generating sweatshop that you've got going there. I mean, I assume you're doing them yourself.
My music therapy. This one is actually really cool because I was invited by one of the biggest DJ beat creators in my little subgenre. If I name drop, no one would know who he was, but for me, he's a big deal. He invited me personally. Super honored. It was really kind of a bit of a reward for making over 150 loops over the last year. So yeah, there I am, Molotov. And this is for a project that the DJ Zakel does every year called the Portervist Lounge. He gets a bunch of people together in the UK. Unfortunately, I can't go because it's in the UK. But it's like a weekend event where a bunch of beat makers and a bunch of scratch DJs get together, and a bunch of the sort of prominent beat makers in the community all make the beats for that weekend, and I contributed to that. So I'm super proud of it, and I'm super proud of the work that all the DJs on that looper did. It's a really good piece of work for that festival, for that event.
So if you want to find this particular release, you can download the Table Beats app for your smartphone. You can search for Portervist Lounge, or you can actually just search the hit the library button in the app and search the username Molotov, and this will come up as the latest project that you contributed to, as well as all of the other solo releases that you will have done under the name Molotov. And Gold Tooth 2 was your most recent full release, just
Yes.
you, right? So
Yes.
I was just checking that out today, and there's some dope beats there too. It's nice actually to play while you're working, just to get in the zone. They just repeat after like 20 or 30 seconds, whatever. Just doing your thing. Next thing you know, half an hour has gone by, and I've just been listening to the same thing over and over again. I'm gonna try the next track now.
Just in the groove. I've been doing some lo-fi beats, so I might come up with a lo-fi looper at one time. And I know that a lot of university students love just throwing on lo-fi channels and listening to them for hours, because they just sort of repeat and sort of gently blend into the next track. So it's definitely a thing to study, to work by. So yeah.
And there's a little thing that I have actually saving for next week along those lines that we will talk about together and share with all our myriad viewers as well. Last couple of projects, Tasia, you may remember her, Tasia Custodi, new YouTube video and podcast episode on all the best features from iOS 15, which just finally dropped in the last couple of days. Gray, you've already installed iOS 15, correct?
I have, yeah.
And how late before the show, or how close to the show start did you actually do that? Because you don't stream on your iOS device, so hopefully that's okay. Right?
That's correct. I don't. But I mean, you say that, and in the background, right behind this window, is the macOS Monterey beta going, "Hey, do you want to install me?" And I'm like, I don't know. I got to teach tomorrow, but a week before, I guess, yeah, I'm back there. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pull the trigger.
Well, tell us how it goes. So if you want to check out Tasia's works, you can visit youtube.com/Tasia Custodi or TasiaCustodi.com to find that, and her podcast episodes as well. Like I said, she did a YouTube episode and a podcast episode, audio only, talking all about the best iOS 15 features. If you want to find out more about Momentous, you can find us at momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv, instagram.com/momentous.tv. On YouTube, you can try searching for my name and look for the Momentous playlists that we have there. Very special thank you to Jamie Reynolds for joining us once again. We really appreciate it, Jamie. We always like chatting with you, and maybe we'll see you again sometime over the next few weeks. And of course, Will Silver, Gray Williams, and to all of you who are watching, we wish you all a week that is truly momentous.